It was an ordinary morning in Jerusalem, and the temple was bustling with life, but not in the way it should have been. The sounds of prayers and spiritual songs had been drowned out by the constant clinking of coins, the shouts of merchants advertising their goods, and the constant movement of people buying and selling. The sacred space meant for connecting with God had been overrun by greed and commerce. Jesus entered the vast courtyard of the temple, but something was different about his demeanor. His eyes, usually calm, now burned with intensity. His heart, always full of love for the people, now ached with sadness and indignation. He looked around, seeing the temple not as a place of worship, but as a marketplace in full swing. Step by step, Jesus walked among the money changers' tables and the sellers of doves. His piercing gaze took in everything, and with each moment, his silent fury grew. This place, which should have been his Father's house, had become a noisy, profane bazaar. Without warning, with swift and deliberate movement, he approached one of the tables. Without uttering a word, with an unexpected force, Jesus flipped the table. The sound of coins scattering on the ground made the merchants freeze, their eyes wide with shock. The stunned silence lasted only for a moment. Jesus began to overturn all the nearby tables one by one as the coins spilled across the stone floor. The metallic clatter echoed throughout the temple. The dove sellers tried to hold on to their cages, but Jesus pushed them aside, toppling chairs and releasing the birds. Chaos erupted in the marketplace. Then his voice, full of divine authority, thundered through the temple. "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer.'" His voice boomed like thunder in the sudden stillness. "But you have made it a den of thieves." The money changers and merchants stood there, stunned, watching him. There was no challenge in their eyes. They couldn't confront him. He wasn't just a man. There was a greater power within him, an intense presence that no one dared to oppose. Jesus continued to drive out everything in his path. Coins rolled down the steps, animals fled from their opened cages, and the sound of hurried footsteps as merchants scrambled to escape filled the air. Chaos reigned, yet within Jesus there was calm, certainty. His actions weren't driven by blind rage, but by a deep love for what was pure and sacred. Those who had come to the temple to pray stood watching with wide eyes. It wasn't just the physical temple that Jesus was purifying. It was the soul of that place, and perhaps even the souls of those present. The impact of his fury wasn't only material, it was spiritual. After cleansing the temple of all its profanation, Jesus stood still for a moment. The noise of commerce was replaced by a deep, holy silence. He breathed deeply, and in his eyes there was no longer anger, but an unshakable peace. His gaze swept over the space. He had restored the sanctity of that place, if only for a time. With steady steps, Jesus turned to leave, his disciples following silently, knowing they had witnessed something momentous. It wasn't just an act of expulsion. It was an act of renewal, of divine justice. The temple had once again, even if only briefly, become a place where God's presence dwelled, and everyone who witnessed that moment would never forget the power and the zeal of Jesus for his Father's house. The strength of the Son of God wasn't just in his words, it was in his actions.